recall the show. I think it was Nolene and Laurie, right? And they lived in a place called Sylvania Waters.
It was called Sylvania Waters.
And it was gold. It was widely regarded as the first reality show.
Fly on the Wall.
Yeah. Now it's been actually quite highly acclaimed. It was 5 stars. Nolene and Laurie.
It was just a bunch of people fighting with each other and yelling with Australian accents. I remember it well.
Okay, finally on the panel with me, Wallace Chapman. By the way, I'm with Scott Campbell and Nikki Pellegrino. To Dunedin now, we're a local playground. Has been criticised for being, of all things, too safe. A photo of the playground, which is near the University Oval cricket ground, was shared on the online community Reddit earlier this week, and it showed a swing bridge that has been lowered, now hovering just a couple of centimetres off the ground. Rather than bark, the ground is covered by a rubber mat, and there's not a flying fox to be seen. The NZ Herald report of the playground was dismissed as to quote, playground designed by lawyers, and people saying there's no element of danger, which is important for teaching children's boundaries and risk management. You've got kids, Scott?
I do.
So what do you think about this? Do playgrounds need an element of danger?
Absolutely they do. I often say to the kids, go on then and see what happens and see if you'll do it again next time. Of course, I'm not going to let them climb to the top of the castle and jump off or anything like that, but this one is ridiculous. There's the bridge is hardly a bridge. It's about a centimetre off the ground. And if they fall off there, they're not going to hurt themselves anyway. I was talking to my boxing coach the other week and I said, just hit me. Because if you hit me, next time I won't be hit by you. So yes, you need calculated risk in a playground.
A message from a producer here. Older kids need fun playgrounds too, with big fast slides and scary flying foxes. But I tell you what, Scott, when that kid comes off and bangs their teeth on a pole or some hard matting, and you go to the dentist, you change your tune, don't you?
Yeah.
You'll change your tune.
Mind you, I'm probably paying for that.
Low.
I'm probably paying for that because I fell off a number of things when I was younger, and I'm probably paying for it now as well too. But look, remember we banned lolly scrambles in the Christmas parades and those sorts of things because it hits people in the face. I'm sorry, but are we being that soft?
I ride horses, and I think little girls who are horse riders, they learn incredible resilience because they do fall off and hurt themselves.
Highly dangerous sport, that one.
Highly dangerous sport, and yet I'm still here.
Wouldn't do it. Ban it. You should ban it.
Ban it. I think those little girls, they learn resilience. They learn to keep trying. I mean, it's just fantastic sport for girls and boys, probably.
I know it's only a small issue, says someone, but I really think that not allowing children to learn how to reappraise risk and to let them take it is really detrimental to the development. That's what one commentator said on this playground. Do you think is there something in that?
Yeah, I think there is.
On a more serious note?
Well, because when you become a bit older and you then have to take some risks and you're not sure what the consequences might be and you've never done it before, then you might take a real stupid risk. Yeah, at least by understanding that you might fail at times. I'm a huge advocate of that. I don't think it should be dangerous, but there should be some risk.
All right, and meanwhile, raise that bridge above more than 2.
There's my petition.
There's a petition.
Raise the
We've
bridge.
done it. We've got a petition for Scott Campbell. Raise the bridge.
And lifestyles of the rich and famous.
You've been wonderful. Nikki Pellegrino, Scott Campbell, thank you very much for being with us. Thanks to Kate and Cherry for producing. I'm Wallace Chapman, back with you 3:45 tomorrow.
Kei te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. Ko Lisa Owen Takuingwa. Tonight, a man who alleges he was physically assaulted by a Labour Party staffer speaks out about who knew what and when. He says he's been re-traumatised by the party's handling of the investigation and he wants to talk directly to Jacinda Ardern. So how long can the Labour Party president hold on? And the Checkpoint mayoral debate. In one corner, incumbent Phil Goff. In the other, his challenger John Tamahere. Both join me live in the studio after 5:30. Buckle up, it'll be an interesting ride. The government unveils plans for a suicide prevention office and free counselling for the bereaved. And we take a final tour of quake-damaged Lancaster Park.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata with DNA. A man who says he was assaulted by a Labour staffer says it was clear the party didn't know what it was doing when it was investigating the complaints, and the process has been re-traumatising for the victims. The Labour Party President Nigel Haworth is under increasing pressure over the handling of the claims, with the Prime Minister refusing to express full confidence in him. A 19-year-old volunteer says she was sexually assaulted by the staffer last year and raised it with Labour's ruling council during an internal investigation, but no disciplinary action was taken. Another complainant has now spoken out, telling Checkpoint he felt like the party's investigation was protecting the accused perpetrator. He says he didn't make a complaint to the police because he worried about being believed. And you can hear the full interview on Checkpoint after the news. The National Party's continuing question who knew in the Labour Party about the allegations. The Prime Minister has asked a QC to investigate conflicting accounts about how the party has handled complaints. National's Deputy Leader Paula Bennett says with all of the publicity, Jacinda Ardern should have tried to get to the bottom of what had happened much sooner.
Even the Prime Minister yesterday and this morning in media saying, look, I asked if it was sexual in nature of the complaints and it wasn't, so she dismissed herself of it. So what is the threshold for her caring that there are 12 people within her party who have been so concerned that they've gone, it has to be of a sexual nature?
Paula Bennett. Jacinda Ardern says she is commenting on what the party told her, that it had never received an allegation of sexual assault. The National Party leader says it's not a fair and accurate representation to say he met a member of the Chinese secret police while overseas last week. Simon Bridges met with Gao Zhenggung on his 5-day visit to China. Anne-Marie Brady, a Canterbury University professor and expert on Chinese politics, has described Mr. Zhenggung as being part of the Chinese secret police. But Mr. Bridges says he met with a Chinese minister.
You're coming in about this guy, always the secret police guy. What he is one of the leaders of China in the top 25, who is their justice and law and order spokesperson. I'd say with you, and with your greatest respect, be a bit responsible.
Simon Bridges says going to China doesn't mean he agrees with everything they do. He says he raised concerns about human rights abuses but wouldn't detail who he raised them with. A former constable says he considered suicide because of the persistent bullying he faced during his time with the police. An officer for nearly 3 decades in England and New Zealand, he says he quit a few years ago due to mental stress. He is one of 40 current or former police staff who have told RNZ bullying is widespread in the police. Within weeks of starting his job here, he says the bullying started as his sergeant sought to isolate him from the group.
I just broke down, absolutely broke down. And I felt about an inch tall. I really did. But I had to go. Otherwise, I think I would have. I would have topped myself. I really would.
The former constable says he sought counselling. The Police Commissioner Mike Bush says he doesn't think bullying is part of the police culture. He says staff should trust the police complaints process. Mental health campaigner Mike King is backing the government's plan to tackle the country's high rate of suicide. The plan announced today includes more support for people bereaved by suicide and a national office to coordinate prevention efforts. Mike King was at the launch and says everyone can help reduce the incidence of suicide.
There is a significant part of our population who have got this massive inner critic and they're telling themselves they're not worthy, and what's the point? So what's the answer to disconnection? Let's get connected again. Let's lift everybody up. Let's help everybody to stop being horrible people and be kind to each other.
Mike King says he is particularly pleased that the plan includes community groups. The government says measles vaccines will be redistributed, so all doctors' clinics in Auckland have adequate stocks. Auckland has had 959 confirmed cases of measles in the current outbreak. Some GPs, notably in Papakura, say problems in supply meant some clinics have had to turn people away. Associate Health Minister Julianne Genter says that will be fixed, so priority areas in Auckland have stocks. A court has heard an Auckland teenager was too scared to run from a house where she was being beaten and tortured. Demetrius Pairama's body was found in a steel drum at an abandoned state house in Māngere last July. Annika Smith reports.
Toko Shane Winter and Kerry Tiamo are on trial in the High Court at Auckland, accused of murdering Miss Paidama a day before her body was found. In an interview with the police, a teenage witness who has immunity said Miss Paidama was tied up, punched and burnt in the house. She said she told Miss Paidama, who she described as her best friend, to run from the house, but the teenager said she was too scared. The Crown contends the defendants worked together to kidnap and murder Miss Paidama, a young drifter in the care of Oranga Tamariki at the time of her death. The trial before Justice Brewer and a jury is set down for 4 weeks. Atuite ko Ti Matua ko Annika Smith aho.
It's 5:05. Super Rugby will make its earliest start to a season next year when the Blues host the Chiefs on January 31st to allow for an uninterrupted competition window. In previous non-World Cup years, the competition took a 3-week break to accommodate an international window in June before resuming in early July. The 2020 Super Rugby season will run continuously without a break until the final on June 20th before test matches begin in July. Next year's competition will also mark the final season of Japan's Sunwolves after Sanzar cut them in the wake of the Japan Rugby Union's decision to withdraw their financial support of the team. A change in training regime is keeping champion swimmer Sophie Pascoe fresh despite 15 years of competing at international level. Pascoe won her first medal of the Para-Swimming World Champs in London this morning, dominating the women's 100-metre freestyle 59 final and finishing 2.5 seconds ahead of her nearest rival. It was her 9th world title and the first of 4 events she is competing in. Ahead of the World Champs, Pascoe says she and her coach decided to change her training regime and she's doing more things outside of the pool, such as cross-training, rock climbing, boxing and yoga.
I've had great fun enjoying new types of training, but also reaping the benefits of that. You know, my times, haven't defaulted in the pool from doing different types of training. So I can't ask for much more than that other than, give it 100% every single day in every session that I do.
Tonight, Sophie Pascoe will chase a second gold medal in the 100 metres backstroke. That's the news.
Should the Labour Party president go?
Yes, today, last night. There's no question in my mind whatsoever.
Can he hold on? He is on very thin ice, is probably the best way to describe it. He is at the centre of all of this. He was given the responsibility to deal with these sensitive matters. And what did the Prime Minister know?
I've had contradictory information around what the Labour Party was told, what I've been told by the Labour Party and what I see in the public domain.
Asking the hard questions. Morning Report, weekdays from 6, on air and online.
Then on 9 to noon, language advocates, teachers and authors Scotty and Stacey Morrison on using te reo Māori at home and in the workplace. And after 10, Dr Anne Alley, counter-terrorism expert and the first Muslim woman to be sworn into the Australian Parliament. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel. Rain or showers, possible thunderstorms and localised downpours. Easing to isolated showers tomorrow morning. For Waikato to Whanganui, also Bay of Plenty and Central High Country. Scattered showers clearing from the south tonight. Fine tomorrow but possible showers in the west. Gisborne to Wairarapa, fine spells and isolated showers but some rain in Gisborne tonight. Manawatu to Wellington, also Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury. Mainly fine, isolated showers in Nelson tomorrow evening. For Bulla and Westland, fine but cloud increasing tonight with possible light showers, 1 or 2. Otago mainly fine but brief showers in the south early tomorrow. Fiordland and Southland fine at first but a few light showers about the coast. Rain developing overnight, easing to isolated showers tomorrow morning. Showers increasing in Fiordland tomorrow evening. And Chatham Islands light showers clearing tonight. Periods of rain tomorrow evening followed by showers. RNZ National, it's 9 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. A man who says he was assaulted by a Labour Party staffer would like to meet with Jacinda Ardern to discuss the party's handling of claims of sexual abuse and assault. The Prime Minister has refused to express full confidence in Labour President Nigel Haworth, who is under increasing pressure over the claims. A 19-year-old volunteer claims she was sexually assaulted by the Labour staffer last year, and she raised it with Labour's ruling council during an internal investigation, but no disciplinary action was taken. Another complainant has now spoken out, telling Checkpoint it was clear that the party had no idea what they were doing and that its internal investigation process was re-traumatising for the victims. I asked the complainant, whose voice we have distorted to protect his identity, to tell me about his experience.
I challenged him about his abusive behaviour towards women in the party, in particular an incident that I was witness to, as well as incidents that I was aware of, and he verbally attacked and physically assaulted me.
When you say physically assaulted you, what do you mean?
So I challenged him about his behaviour. In particular, I said that his behaviour was threatening towards women. I said it's threatening towards women in the same way that I feel like you're trying to threaten me now. He said in response, yes, I am trying to threaten you, at which point he stepped towards me with a clenched fist and made a swing at me. People held him back, so the punch did not land. However, it was a definite sort of getting in my space.
So he tried to thump you with a closed fist.
Yes, and in the past, at an event, at a private event hosted by members of Young Labour, he was behaving in a way that was again, threatening towards women, and I said to him that his behaviour was, he pushed me to the wall.
Can you clarify for me, when you say that his behaviour toward women was threatening, what did that look like? What did you see?
It could manifest in different ways. What was really common was that he would bully women, often in public spaces, often women that we later found out were people that he may have sexually assaulted. He shouted at them, reduced them to tears in public meetings, talked over them, blocked access to rooms. One particular incident with a young woman, he verbally berated her in a meeting, at which point she was reduced to tears. She was shaking so much from sobbing because she was so overwhelmed by his appalling behaviour, and he blocked access to the door. He hung around the door of the entrance so that she had to physically squeeze past him in order to leave.
So you witnessed that yourself, did you?
Yes, I did.
Okay. When did you first complain about his behaviour, and who did you complain to?
So in regards to my complaint, I made a complaint regarding the allegations I've just talked to you about in December 2018, so the end of last year. And I talked to initially Diana Lacey, and then the investigation process went on after that.
So Diana Lacey, who's high up in the Labour Party structure, you complained to her directly. Was that in writing or was it verbally?
I sent an initial complaint to Andre and Anderson, the secretary, and CC'd in Diana, and also met with her, as was the case with others.
What contact have you had with the other complainants? Did you know them, and did you know that they had complained?
Yes, we have gone through this. We went through the process together.
So, as I understand it, you're the only male complainant, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
That I'm aware of.
So, a committee was formed to hear these complaints. It was convened, and you gave evidence before that committee, correct?
Yes.
So, tell me about that process. What was it like, and what did you tell them?
It was horrific. The whole thing felt like it was orchestrated to protect him and his image, and the power imbalance was huge. It was clear that the party had no idea what they were doing.
when you say it was aimed at protecting him, by him you mean this man who was a young Labour member?
Yes.
What did you tell the committee?
I told the committee my story with a degree of detail. I also talked to them about his behaviour within the party generally and what I'd witnessed. The story that I told you before also featured. I told them about his experiences with other women that were tantamount to sexual assault, sexual abuse, but of course being aware that they weren't my stories and that they would have to talk to those individuals themselves as part of that investigation process.
So you raised concerns about sexually inappropriate behaviour to this committee?
Yes.
Are you sure that you raised the sexual allegations with the committee?
I raised issues... Oh, sorry. Continue.
Not just issues of bullying?
No, definitely issues relating to sexual assault and sexual abuse.
How can you be sure of that, your recollection?
Because I remember it.
You had written testimony as well, did you?
I gave verbal testimony. I didn't provide any written testimony.
So you're sure that you told this committee at that point that there were issues around inappropriate sexual behaviour by this person?
Yes.
When was it?
It was in March, March of this year.
And who was present?
There were three people on the panel. A man named a woman named and a woman named.
Did you ever have reason to present this information to Nigel Haworth?
We were told that the investigation would work along the lines of we would be meeting with the three panel members and we would be telling our stories, and then a process would be followed, at which point a report would be presented to New Zealand Council. At no point was there ever an expectation on us, but also we never thought that we would have to sit down and talk to Nigel.
So, did Nigel Haworth know that these allegations were sexual in nature?
Yes.
How do you know that?
So, I'm unaware of what Nigel was or was not privy to as whilst these interviews were going on. What I do know is that Nigel met with nearly all complainants after the results of the investigation were told to us, and we basically communicated that we thought that the process was completely unsatisfactory. We then met with Nigel and discussed reasons as to why that was. I myself met with Nigel and described elements of sexual abuse and sexual assault, but also wider sexual abuse and rape culture within the party itself.
So when did you have a one-on-one meeting with Nigel Haworth?
I'm afraid I can't remember the particular date. From what I recall, it was in July.
Who arranged the meeting?
Nigel offered to meet with us, and I accepted that invitation.
So was it just the two of you in that meeting?
Diana Lacey was there as well.
Okay. And so at that meeting, you explicitly raised with him allegations of sexual assault?
Yes.
And where did you have that meeting?
Fraser House.
Okay. So you believe utterly that Nigel Haworth was fully aware of the fact that these allegations were sexual in nature, and he has known this for some time?
Nigel Haworth knew that there were elements of sexual assault and sexual abuse within the claims that were brought before the investigation committee. That was very clear right from the beginning. Everyone in the investigation panel knew that. We know through other survivors who have spoken out through that process, that they raised that, and then when they received their transcripts after the fact, after the investigation had already concluded, that those elements had been omitted from their transcripts.
Right. So you received the transcripts for review of your evidence after the committee had reached a conclusion that no action should be taken.
A conclusion was reached that no action could be taken, and then after that we received our transcripts.
What do you think of that conclusion that no action is required?
It's completely false. The process wasn't fair. The process didn't follow principles of natural justice. There was no experience on the panel or for those who were running the investigation when it came to survivors of either sexual abuse or assault or other forms of abuse or assault. The party offered support, yes. However, the process itself was deeply re-traumatising, and to the effect that many of us didn't feel as if anything would actually come out of the investigation.
Did the transcripts accurately reflect the evidence that you had given at that committee hearing?
No.
How so?
Well, I discussed the fact that there was a degree of sexual abuse and sexual assault behaviour by this individual, bearing in mind that I myself had not experienced anything, but that other victims had, and that the investigation needed to talk about that with them, but also about his general reputation for sexual abuse and sexual assault, and also a general culture within the Labour Party of rape culture. Those things were discussed, and on review of the transcript from my interview, that was not recorded.
Did you speak to the other complainants and asked about whether their transcripts accurately reflected their evidence?
Yes, one victim who was subject to a sexual assault by this individual has said to me that they detailed this in their investigation, and that has not been accurately reflected. We've seen that play out in the press over the last few days.
Okay. Who else within Labour knew about the nature of these complaints, that they were allegations of sexual assault? Did any cabinet ministers know?
Well, I can't say for sure. So I'm unsure. I can only speak to my experiences, which is with Nigel and the interviewing panel.
Okay. So this person who the allegations have been made against, I don't want you to name them, but how important are they within the Labour Party structure?
It's difficult to be able to describe their influence in a way when it comes to specific roles. So they hold a very important position within Parliament, a very influential position. What you have to remember as well is that this was a person who was older than his victims and exercised a degree of authority over them in the sense that they looked up to him as an older member of the party who was in influential positions and aspirational positions.
Is this person's family well connected to the Labour Party?
Yes.
How do you think those things have influenced the decisions of the committee and the people dealing with your complaints, if at all?
So from what I understand from the Secretary of the Labour Party, this individual and one of his close relatives, had discussions with New Zealand Council members about the allegations. To the exact details of that, I don't know. But I believe that influence has led to a degree of conflict of interest, which means that this process can't possibly be seen as fair.
So overall, how has this been handled?
Poorly. The effect has been that as victims, we feel traumatised. We're afraid. We don't know what the consequences of our actions will be when it comes to speaking out. We fear repercussion, and we don't know that we'll be believed. We also don't know that anything will be done about it. When you're a member of the Labour Party, you are united with these feelings of wanting to make the world a better place, these feelings of solidarity, these feelings of wanting to champion social justice. The people that you work with are like your family. And it is heartbreaking to go through this process, and you feel like you're betraying people for speaking up about abuse that you've experienced. It's incredibly isolating, but we know that this is what we need to do. For too long, men like this individual have been allowed to get away with assault and abuse within the Labour Party, but this is our story, and this is about us taking back control.
You were sent some instructions about conditions of your movement around Parliament. Can you just tell us? I believe Nigel Haworth issued some directives. What were you told?
We were told that we weren't allowed to go into the part of the parliamentary building that he worked in, and he wasn't allowed to be in spaces where we would be. But essentially, we were told that there were certain parts of Parliament that we weren't allowed to go into. Which, to be frank, Parliament is the epicentre of our democratic country, and to tell members of our country that they can't access important parts of that is wrong.
Have you made a complaint to the police?
I haven't, no.
Can you explain to us why?
Because I don't think that I would be believed. I've spent a lot of time convincing myself of this idea that maybe, my experience isn't awful enough to go to the police. I worry about whether it will just be a long road to nothing. I have a degree of anxiety about talking to the police about issues that are difficult. And also as a man involved in this situation, the only man, I feel that my story doesn't hold as much merit as other people's, and that has been hard.
Would you feel comfortable talking directly to the Prime Minister if she wanted to speak to you about this? Would you feel comfortable to speak to her about what happened?
I would want to be able to have a conversation with Jacinda away from anyone else. If she wanted, if that was something that would be possible, I would be open to that. One of the things that has made a difference is that as a group of victims, we have dealt with this issue together, and we are united together. And any opportunity that Jacinda would want to have to talk to one of us, she would have to talk to all of us.
Would you welcome that opportunity?
Yes, absolutely.
Is it plausible, do you think, that she didn't know of the nature of these allegations, the full extent of them?
Absolutely. I can entirely see that as being possible.
And what makes you say that?
Because I don't believe that if she knew, she would have allowed the investigation to continue in the way that it did.
So do you believe there have been real attempts to shut this down?
Yes, absolutely. This isn't about politics. It's not about playing games. This isn't about anything like that. When you strip it down, this is about one man who was allowed to hurt vulnerable people like me, people like the other victims, for too long. And it needs to stop.
Checkpoint has seen a copy of an email sent from the complainant addressed to Labour Party President Nigel Howarth, expressing dissatisfaction at the investigation. The email was sent on May 21st this year, and it explicitly includes the words predatory behaviour, sexual violence and physical violence. Nigel Howarth declined to speak to Checkpoint, referring us to a 3-sentence statement he released earlier today. The statement says the allegation of a sexual assault was not provided to the President and Acting General Secretary at a meeting in the Wellington Central Library or subsequently to the Labour panel. Checkpoint also sought comment from Andre Anderson and Diana Lacey. We have not received a response from either of them. Turning now to business news a little earlier for a change. Here's Nona Peltier. Hi Nona, how have the markets been going today?
Well, it was really interesting. I was watching them quite closely coming up to the close, and they were down quite significantly, about 1%. That was the NZX Top 50 Index. Not surprising, Asia was also down, and that's partly because some prices out of production in China were dropping at the fastest rate in 3 years. That did sort of shake up the market a bit, and that's tied back there to those trade concerns. Now, what happened then? Just at the close, the market bounced up again, and so it finished down only 0.5%, which is better than where it was looking. So we were down 60 points to 11,143. And the New Zealand dollar was steady at 64.3 US cents, 93.8 Australian, and 52.1 British pence. And interestingly, today we had a bit of news out of the United States. JP Morgan, it's an investment banker. They've come up with a new index to keep track of those Trump tweets. Yes, indeed. They call it
a Trump barometer.
Yeah, it's sort of, no, it's called the Volfefe. After Trump's tweet, the Confefe tweet, the one that we don't really know what it meant. So it's a bit the same sort of idea, except we do know that when President Trump tweets, he moved the market 146 times with his tweets, just to say.
Thanks, Nona. Nona Peltier.
We'll keep track of that for you.
With business news. Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, Auckland mayoral candidates Phil Goff and John Tamahere are live in the studio going head-to-head on the issues that matter to you. You can watch on Freeview, Channel 50 or on our Checkpoint Facebook page. So do get in touch and tell us what those issues are that are important to you so we can ask them both. They're coming into the room now while I speak. You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let's go now to Susanna with the headlines.
A man who says he was assaulted by a Labour staffer says it was clear the party didn't know what it was doing when it was investigating the complaints, and the process has been re-traumatising for the victims. He has told Checkpoint he felt like the party's investigation was protecting the accused perpetrator. He says he didn't make a complaint to the police because he worried about being believed. The National Party leader says it's not fair or accurate to say he met a member of the Chinese secret police on his 5-day visit to China. Canterbury University professor Anne-Marie Brady, who's an expert on Chinese politics, says Guo Shenkung is a part of the secret police. But Mr Bridges says he met with one of China's top 25 leaders, and going to China doesn't mean he agrees with everything they do. A former constable says he considered suicide because of persistent bullying he faced and quit a few years ago due to mental stress. Originally a police officer in the UK, soon after starting work here, he says the bullying began as his sergeant sought to isolate him from the group. The Police Commissioner Mike Bush says he doesn't think bullying is part of the police culture. The government's plan for tackling the country's high suicide rate is being backed by mental health campaigner Mike King. The plan includes more support for people bereaved by suicide, for those supporting people at risk, and includes community groups as well as the National Office. Mike King says everyone can help reduce suicide, and one way is by being kind to each other. The government says it will arrange for measles vaccines to be redistributed to make sure all doctors' clinics in Auckland have enough. There are now 959 confirmed cases in Auckland, and numbers continue to climb. Some clinics have had to turn people away, but the government says it will make sure there are enough vaccines in priority areas. The flooding in the Coromandel is expected to recede tonight following drenching rain, which saw 150 millimetres fall in the past 24 hours. Those are the latest news headlines from RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thank you, Susanna. If you're just joining us, you've come in at exactly the right time. This is Checkpoint, and we've got an Auckland mayoral debate. I'm here with Phil Goff and John Tamaheri. Good evening to both of you. Kia ora.
Evening, Lisa. Kia ora.
Okay, let's start with you, Phil. Two most important qualities for the next mayor of Auckland.
Trustworthiness and reliability.
John?
Yeah, integrity and being straight.
They're the same things?
Well, it depends, and I'm sure the voters are going to determine that very shortly.
Okay, well, let's see if we can get some direct, straight answers from you this evening. John, you're going to freeze rates, you say. So you need council agreement to do that. How are you going to get that?
By winning the election. So elections in local body politics are predominantly mayoral driven because they're the people that drive policy. If you look at all the local body or local board governing councillors, they don't. And so the contest in Auckland is specifically about a suite of policies that I've introduced versus a suite of policies that I don't know.
Right, so the mayor is kind of like the president, is that what you're telling me? You get to make all the decisions?
No, I didn't say that. What I've said to you is you're putting the cart before the horse. You have to put a suite of policies up, you have to take those to the electorate, and you've got to win the mandate. Once that mandate's won, and the dust settles, no one knows who's going to be returned.
Okay. So is that how it works, Phil?
No, it's not how it works. Council's made up of 21 people. Yeah, the mayor leads. I introduce each budget proposal, and each time I've introduced a budget proposal, I've got overwhelming support, and particularly the 10-year budget, which was the most important document in this term of council. But you can't automatically rely on there being a majority support for your proposal. You've got to go around, you've got to persuade each councillor that what you're proposing is the right thing to do. I wouldn't think there was more than probably 2 or 3 councillors that would believe that it's realistic to freeze your rates at a time when this city needs more than ever before to invest heavily in the infrastructure we need to build for the future.
John, have you done a head count? Do you know what support you would have with the current councillors? 2 or 3 is what Phil
I've got
says.
one more. Hang on, I've got one. Well, he wouldn't know. I've got one more.
Do you know?
Hang on.
No.
Hang on.
Do you know?
Hang on.
Direct, straight answers
Hang on,
of
I've
what
got one
you're
more
promising.
policy to release, and then I will poll the present councillors. Here's the thing: you don't know whether they're going to be returned either. So what does that count tell you?
We don't know if they'll be returned, but it might give you a general feel, because at the moment you've got 0 and you need the majority on side.
But I've just indicated to you. Well,
what's the policy you've got left to release?
Hang on, he's got 9 that oppose him right now out of the 20.
No, that's not true.
They've voted. No, there's been an A team and a B team. That's true.
You just make it up, John.
And you've been outvoted on a number of policies.
Once on a minor policy.
So, Phil, behave yourself. You can get your chance. You can protect him, Lisa. Look, so going back to
that's a Trump tactic.
Going back to the point that I've just said, once the dust is settled, we'll work out the numbers then.
Okay. Phil, despite increasing rates and targeted rates and a fuel tax, the council is in a position where it has, quote, limited capacity to deal with external shock. We're pretty much maxed out, are we? Is this the best you can do after 3 years?
Yeah. Hey, well, first of all, you talk about despite rates. We've had the lowest rate increases of any significant city in New Zealand, so let's get it in perspective. And you can go and check that. Take your top 20 cities and you'll find that Auckland rate increases in the case of Hamilton
is only
a third.
in a really pretty financial position, are we?
No, we're in exactly the position that all growth cities are in New Zealand, which is you have and more so in Auckland, because we're getting more growth in Auckland than the rest of the country put together. So there's a huge demand on expansion of infrastructure, and you know from the stories you've been doing for years that for a decade we've been underinvesting in infrastructure. We're now playing catch up to get that investment into transport, into housing, into the environment to make this the city that it can be.
Yes, Auckland is too small to be gouged in rates and stealth taxes. Phil's brought 4 of them in.
That's bullshit.
I'll rattle them off. It is the 11.5% petrol tax.
Stealth
tax.
The environment. I sat in the studio and talked about that 3 years ago. How can that be a stealth tax?
No, let me just rattle them off. The environment
but try
tax,
to keep to the truth.
The water tax, the bed night tax. These are truths. This is you've brought the most. You've brought the most gouging rates, and this is why the cost of living in the city, it's a death by 100 cuts when you've got a leader like this. So
John,
let's
I
talk
just
about
want to
that.
interrupt there. You
Yeah.
talked about those things.
That's all nonsense, by the
we
way.
know we know what you stand. I'll give you a right to reply.
Yeah,
We
thank
know where
you.
you stand on the regional petrol tax, right? We know on rates freezes. So these extra taxes to bring forward the improvements in wastewater, to stop poo washing up on our beaches, and to do something for the environment. Will you get rid of those when you come in?
If I'm elected, then I get to release 49% of the equity in water care to achieve those. So you've got to.
So if you get to sell water care, I want to be clear on this, and I'd like a pretty straightforward answer. So you're saying if you get elected as mayor, you're going to sell off 49% of water care, and therefore the extra targeted rates will go. The environmental rate and
it's a straight set off. If you do the numbers,
so you're ditching them. Okay.
No. If you do the numbers, what he's brought in terms of his rates.
Again, you need a law change and the support of half of council in order to do that.
That's not going to happen.
But but I'm not a puppet to Wellington. I want to be a champion for Auckland. This guy's a sellout to Wellington.
You're probably a right of reply. So let's go through some of those.
Are you a sellout to Wellington?
No, absolutely not. Let's give you one example of that. We increased the transport budget for Auckland by 50% when I negotiated the first Auckland Transport Alignment Project. That's $9 billion more than we were getting out of Wellington before. Now, is that a sellout? No, that was a remarkable achievement, and all of the councillors acknowledged that. Let's come back to John's point about the privatisation. He keeps saying selling equity, but it's privatising. You're selling the shares privately. If you sell $500 million worth of, $5 billion, I should say, worth of shares, a shareholder is, all the economists tell me, probably the minimum would be a 7.5% return they would require on that.
That's not true.
That would require, it is true, that would require the water rates for the average family to go up between $200 and $300 a year. That is the equivalent of a 12% increase on general rates. So, and the worst thing, John, about your proposal, no, let me finish. You got a fair go. Let me finish.
Well, I'll have a right of response.
The people that you would hurt most are the low income, because their income is low compared to the rates they have to pay, and secondly those with families.
Three quick points.
Let me I haven't finished.
Privatisation.
I haven't finished on it. Please let me. I've got a right to reply to what you said. You talked about stealth taxes. The environment and the water quality taxes went out to submissions. We got more submissions on that than ever before, and we also polled on it. 2 to 3 to 1, Auckland has said, yes, bring that in if that's a way we can clean our beaches up and we can protect our environment. No stealth about it, absolutely open and transparent.
No, it's important. Firstly, Phil understands privatisation, right? He sold the Bank of New Zealand, sold New Zealand Rail, sold.
He's done the numbers. Have you got some numbers for us?
No, I'm talking about privatisation.
Tell us what it would cost.
A sale of an asset is to sell
what would it cost to increase water rates? Give us your figure.
So what we've got with Phil,
I've given you my figure. Give me yours.
I've got 3 points to make.
Do you have a figure, John?
Let me finish.
Important. People listening, they're hearing $200 to $300 extra dollars.
Let me finish the 2 points.
I'd like to talk about it.
Just tell us what you've got a figure.
Let me finish the 2 points. Now, he's babbling on. Look, we can turn this into a circus, Lisa.
$200 to $300 extra in water rates
I'll come to that.
per household, he is saying. I'd like you to come to it now.
I'm
so
talking
what
about
are your
privatisation.
Numbers? What are your numbers, John?
It's not privatisation when you own 51% of an asset.
Why won't you
answer
the question? Why won't you answer the question?
Do you have numbers
hang on,
on
the
that?
The second issue is this.
Do you have numbers on that,
Can I
John?
come to the numbers now?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Do.
He's telling fibs. The fact of the matter, where's his... See, here's the problem I've got. He's a sitting mayor. He's been sitting there for 3 years on his hands, and he doesn't provide any workings. He pulls numbers out of the sky.
Forget the personal attacks. So just answer the question.
So let's look at the numbers. If you look at his targeted environment tax and his targeted water tax...
you haven't answered the question yet.
They will average out at exactly what New Zealand Super Fund or the ACC fund, who will buy the 49%.
Do you know that they will buy the 49%? Have you had any discussions with anyone?
Here's their problem. They have significant dollars that they want to invest onshore at the moment. They're investing offshore because there are no infrastructure.
Have you had any discussions with anyone, John?
Because I have. But can I come to that?
Who?
New Zealand Super Fund.
And have they expressed interest in buying water care?
Here's the issue.
Have they expressed interest to you in buying water care?
Well, go and ask them.
I'm asking you.
Oh, no, I'm asking you. No, you're asking me all these questions. He won't open the door.
Where's the openness and transparency in what you're doing, John?
He won't open the door to the New Zealand Super Fund. They've got between $8 and $14 billion to invest in our rail, and they can't get a meeting with this guy to get that across the line. And the problem with that is,
All right.
unless we use those funds, he'll start taxing and spending.
Excuse me, Lisa, did you get an answer to any of the questions you asked?
Let's move on from there.
Without an answer.
You've got strong focus on environmental issues, Phil. So planting 1.5 million trees and getting e-cars for the council and all the rest of it. So great, some people will say. But what have you got for the people who are struggling to fill their petrol tank and to pay massive rents? What have you got for them in your policy suite?
Well, a number of things. First of all, in terms of income distribution, the government has brought in a major family package that is designed to put more money into the pockets of those with least income. But what can we do as council? Well, the first thing we can do as council is make it easier for them to use public transport. That's why we've brought in the free travel for kids under 16 on weekends and public holidays. That's why I've reduced or promised to reduce the cost for school kids. And that's why I'm working with Julianne Genter to significantly cut, I would like to use the term slash, the cost of public transport to those using community service cards. That would be a huge help to those who are our most vulnerable and our lowest income earning Aucklanders.
Okay, so a quick question. When was the last time you took public transport from your home into Auckland, from Clevedon? When did you do that?
Well, you know that there's no public transport to Clevedon.
That's my point.
Let me answer. You asked the question, I'll answer
so you
it.
haven't?
No, I have.
You can't?
I have. I sometimes drive to Papuka and catch the train in.
Right, so you still have to use a vehicle.
Yeah, I still have to. Yeah, that's the cost of living in the countryside.
When will we be able, no, it's kind of in the greater Auckland area, when will we be able to opt out of cars, avoid your petrol tax and take convenient public transport? Give me a date.
Yeah, let me tell you what we've achieved. For a start, we've got 100 million passenger trips a year. We haven't done that since 1951. 100 million passenger trips. Our public transport is increasing on our rapid transit lines by 9 to 11% a year.
Great,
that's
but
one of
that
the
doesn't
fastest
answer
rates
my
of increase.
question, does it?
It does. It says more and more people are finding it more and more convenient to travel by public transport. We have had record increases in use of public transport, and that's a good thing. And we are now working, Auckland Transport actually reorganised our bus network system, and the people in Wellington will be crying into their beer over this, and they did it right. They got a massive increase in people using our bus networks. You just look over the North Shore and you see how successful our bus lanes have been, our busways, the Northern Busway. We're building a new one out in the eastern area. We're linking the airports through Puanui with rail. Those are all huge advantages.
No, the problem we've got with the Nirvana is there are not enough park and rides for us to just access public transport in the event that was frequent enough and affordable enough. So what we've got is we're in a sequencing of a build-out, and what he's allowed Auckland Transport to do is just make war on motorists.
No, that's not true.
You know, if you're a woman with children, you got to get to the supermarkets, you got to get to care facilities for the kids, and you've got to get them to school and back. There's no such... the reality is, Lisa, is that 82%, even if we spent the $28 billion in the ATAP, there will still be, and this is on AA's numbers, 82% of folk, minimum, will still require cars. And that's just a necessity.
So speaking of cars, John, your idea for the bridge, how many lanes again, remind me?
10 lanes for motor vehicles, 4 lanes in terms of the pedestrian and cycle, and 2 lanes either way for rail.
So what will that cost?
The engineers from Auckland University that have priced that for me and done the work on that.
How many engineers?
Have priced it between $2 to $4 billion. But
next question. How much will you put aside for acquiring the houses that you will need in St Mary's Bay and over the bridge in Northcote Point? How much are you putting aside
here's the beauty about this. Here's the beauty about the point.
Will you use compulsory acquisition to get those properties to expand the bridge, or how will it work?
Well, like all major projects in this country, this is a New Zealand Transport Agency funded project. It is not a Auckland ratepayers. To suggest that it would bankrupt the city with $10 billion is just telling porkies as usual.
No. You talk to the New Zealand Transport Agency and see what
so about those houses, do you anticipate how many houses would have to go in order to accommodate this?
I don't know the numbers yet, but what we do know is that under our future planning, that has all been planned. What we haven't got is a crystallisation on a solution for another crossing, and Phil wants it in 2030. That community in Auckland needs it within the next 5
No,
to 10
that's
years.
not true.
What's wrong with big sky thinking, Phil? Because where's your big sky project?
Just give me a moment. The first thing is he wants to put trains up the top of the harbour bridge. The gradient is so steep that trains won't go over that gradient, and you can ask any transport expert on that. Secondly, you're going to put the cyclists and the walkers on the top level of the harbour bridge exposed to the elements. Is that going to work? Why would you create another 2 lanes over the harbour bridge when the problems of congestion lie up towards Northcote Road and coming into the city?
What's your solution?
The solution is not to bring more cars into the city when the city is already at maximum
it is
capacity
an arterial
for cars.
Route, Phil. You can't stop it.
No. Look, the future.
It takes people to South Auckland.
The future, Lisa. And you look at any city in the world, even Los Angeles. I'll tell you what my solution is. If you just give me a chance to stop interrupting, the solution is not to build more and wider motorways. That won't work. We're heading towards 2 million people. We're of a size as a city now where we have to have a strong public transport system, and that's what we're building.
Hold your thoughts. Let's tell people it's 11 minutes away from 6. If you're just joining us, you're listening to Phil Goff and John Tamahere, both candidates for the mayoralty. Phil, given the dire situation we have with housing, 30% of Aucklanders are paying more than 30% of their income in rent. Why shouldn't the council housing arm, Panuku, allow a greater percentage of social housing in their developments?
Very good
Why
question.
not?
That's an outstanding question.
Let me tell you what we're doing about that problem, because it is a real problem. First of all, what is succeeding is that our house prices haven't gone up in 3 years. They've gone slightly down compared to the rest of the country. And interest rates have gone down, so houses are becoming more affordable.
Where's that?
One reason they're becoming more affordable is that under the unitary plan, we've zoned up to 1 million sites, potential sites for housing. Secondly, in the last figures that just came out 2 weeks ago, we were consenting 14,236 houses a year. That is 4 times what we were consenting 8-9 years ago. We're building more houses, therefore we are supplying to meet the demand.
I asked you about social housing and Panuku developments.
Let me tell you about social housing.
Why not allow more social houses in those Panuku developments?
But the difference between John and I, his trust is working as a commercial developer, and he wants to pack a whole lot of social housing into one area. Invite into the studio anyone from the community housing providers, and they will tell you that failed. That failed in England with the council estate. It's failed everywhere in the world. What our plans are, and it's consistent with government plans, is that you do a third social housing, a third affordable housing, and a third market housing.
There's not
that
one
way
suburb.
You get a balanced
there's
community.
There's not one suburb in Auckland that
there
reflects a 30-30-30 split.
Of course there is. Mount Roskill, the community I represented for 32 years represents that.
Have a look at your schools and the decile rating. It's just not truthful. What we need in Auckland on brownfield sites that Auckland Council owns, it's strategic and it's necessary, and we have to build a lot more social houses, and he's capped them at 30% on that land. Certain parts of lands, you should have a cap, but in major areas where poorer communities have a right to live, they shouldn't be pushed out into the margins as Phil's doing. We should open up that land.
Okay. And let me just make one other point about social housing. As a result of our advocacy to central government, we're getting 3,500 new social houses built in Auckland in the next 3 years. That is many times the number that has been built in Auckland for any time, probably going back
the homeless downtown,
to the 1980s.
The homeless downtown don't know that.
Okay, John, and the subject
on
the subject of homelessness, 0800 Jacinda, how many people have phoned your phone line?
No,
do you have a phone line?
The point is
there a phone line 0800 Jacinda? Did you actually ever register that?
Phil. The point is...
Can you please answer my question?
I'm telling you a question. The answer to the question is that point was made that it's central government funding, not local body funding.
So let me answer my own question.
And I'll answer it again.
No.
You're going to go... No, let's go straight to the point. Whose job is it to fix homelessness in Auckland City? It's not the ratepayer being double taxed as usual.
Here is the point, John, that some people will see.
No, that's not the point.
Nobody's called your 0800 Jacinda number because the top party owns it. They went out.
You don't even have it. You've advertised it. And you don't
just a minute, Phil.
Well, it's just a farce.
So, did you have any planning behind that policy, or was it just actually a publicity stunt, and there was no depth to that policy
there's
intent
no,
at
no,
all?
no, no, no. You can't say when you walk past them downtown here, when you've got other humans laying in the gutter, you can't say that's a stunt. What you've got to say
No,
is,
I'm saying your
let's fix
phone
it.
line. I'm
Let's fix
asking
it.
you if
Well,
your
let's
phone
fix
line
it.
was a
Well,
stunt.
concentrate on the homeless.
Was your phone line a stunt?
No, my phone line was bringing home to roost whose responsibility it is to fix homelessness in the city, rather than spending millions of dollars of ratepayers' funds subsidising.
You don't even have a phone line, so
Yeah, but I don't care.
So it was a publicity
No, what I care
stunt.
about is
Okay.
bringing home to roost where the
Publicity
responsibility
stunt?
is.
Where was the substance behind that policy and planning? If
Read
you were
the policy.
serious about it.
Let's work through the policy, shall
If
we?
you were serious about it and you were seriously suggesting that phone line, well, you failed because you didn't
I
secure
haven't.
the number,
No,
did
no,
you?
no, I haven't. How have I failed by bringing attention to the fact that we've got homeless on the street that he won't lift, but he'll go and spend money and count them and won't fix them? How has my policy failed when the investment that's coming into the city that we've already paid for from central government hang on,
But
is
isn't
health,
the
welfare and housing.
concern, John, that people will look at that and see, OK, well, he didn't get the number, he wasn't serious about it, maybe he's not serious about any of his other policies too.
No, people like you can frame it like that, but there's plenty of people out on the street that got it real quick. Got it real quick as to where the responsibility for homelessness resides.
OK.
Can I just talk about homelessness, because it really is...
No,
just
I want to
very-
move
no,
on.
but very
I want to
briefly,
move on
I just
to
want to make
something
one
else, Phil.
point.
Very briefly.
It is really important. We have housed 1,000 people, nearly half of them children, in the last 2.25 years through Housing First, which is a group made up of 5 different housing entities, and the steering group of which I chair. 1,000 people out of emergency housing, off the streets, out of cars.
Why are they still down the town?
All right. What is your...
We have housed
why are they still
1,000...
downtown, Phil?
Don't question something that is a fact. Unlike the phone number, this is a real number. 1,003 people housed in 2.25 years by Housing First. That's a fantastic
Gentlemen, we're
that's a
running
fantastic
out of
achievement.
time and there's a lot to
Phil.
get through. I want a very short answer to this, Phil. What's your biggest achievement this term?
I think it's bringing forward by 20 years the cleaning up of our beaches and stopping wastewater going onto it.
John? What do you think his biggest achievement is this term?
Oh, I think the most efficient achievement is Auckland Transport's ability to ticket and fine people.
All right. John,
Keep within the speed limit, mate.
Auckland is a very diverse city. John, do you still think sex between two men is, quote, unhealthy and violating? I know this subject, you're sick of answering this, so let's just get it over and done with quickly and answer directly. Do you still think it's unhealthy and violating?
Funny enough, I was at the LGBTs with him debating.
Well, you didn't answer this question, so could you just answer it for me?
No, funny enough, I was at... No, I'll answer a question that I'll answer. I was at the LGBT debate. Phil was with me. Now, are you from that community?
I am asking you a question, John,
are you from
about
that
whether
community?
you still think that it's unhealthy and violating for two men to have sex. This is a very diverse city. People have a right to know where you stand on this, so how about a direct answer?
As I said at the LGBT debate, they have got a right to their own lifestyle.
That's different to whether you believe it's unhealthy and violating. So do you still believe that?
They've got a right to their own
Why
lifestyle.
is this such an issue for you to give a direct answer to, John?
No, why is it such an issue of you trying to promote the specificity of sexual preference and acts on national radio? I've just answered your question. The LGBT community and all
I'm
its,
asking where
in
you
all its
stand on
colours.
this issue, because you've said a bunch of controversial things over the years, and Auckland is a very diverse community. They have a right to know who they may or may not be voting for. So, were those mistakes, those things that you said?
Look, I was brought up in 60s, 70s New Zealand. You know it. I was brought up by
Were they mistakes?
I was brought up by a Catholic Irish mother, and I have 8 brothers. I was brought up in a black and white world, Lisa. I wasn't brought up in a flash world like yours. So on my street in West Auckland,
So was
we
it a
saw
mistake
the world
what you
black and white.
said? Was it a mistake what you
It was
said?
the way in which that society
your thinking
operated at that
changed?
time. Of course it has.
Okay, so you no longer hold that view?
No, I don't.
Okay, so you say that you're better for every error you have made. So how has that mistake made you a better person?
Well, name one mistake that you've made that hasn't made you better and that you've gone back and you've laid out again. We all learn better by our mistakes. I'm not perfect like Phil Goff and you.
I'm not standing for the mayoral sheet. Okay, Phil, so allegations are that you have divided the council into an A and B team. There was a letter of no confidence in you, allegations of bullying and arrogance on your part. So is it just that you know better than the other councillors, know better the way the system works, or what's the problem there?
No. First of all, it wasn't a letter of no confidence, and go and read it for yourself and you'll see.
I have read it, expressing no confidence in you from some councillors.
No. You go and talk to those councillors that signed that letter. They had a disagreement over one particular aspect, and that was an aspect on which the Ombudsman actually upheld the position that I took. The second thing is, yes, of course there'll be disagreements on council from time to time, but watch in, we're online, every council meeting, watch in when I chair a meeting and give me one instance where I have chaired that meeting unfairly or unreasonably. I get on with just about every councillor on that council on a personal basis.
So any suggestion otherwise is incorrect, is that what you're saying?
No, we have different opinions on some things. That's not unusual. But tell me how any Minister of Finance in a government would feel to be able to pass their budget with a 70 or 80% majority in favour of that budget. And that's what I've achieved on the 3 key financial documents that I've proposed to Council and has been passed by Council.
All right, we're
and I want to clarify one other thing. I have never, ever, in my whole political career, been accused of bullying anybody. That is not me. I've never done it.
We're counting down to the pips, and none of us will have a job if we crash them.
So that is true, my friend. And if you're going to make allegations to the contrary, you better put your evidence on the table.
Over here, gentlemen. Yeah. Quick fire. Concerts at Eden Park. For them, against them, John?
Absolutely for them.
Phil?
I think
yes or no?
No, they're provided. The plans provide for 5 concerts a year. I'd be happy for that.
No more?
That's what the plans allow.
Is it because Helen Clark objects to them?
No. It's because a whole lot of people in the residential area. If you work the stadium the way that you need to on concert, that would disturb their lifestyle.
Those are the pips.
They know.
Time for the news.
Great, thank you very much.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata with DNA. Some of the people who've complained about a Labour Party staffer have accused the party's president of not telling the truth and say he has let them down. Labour President Nigel Howarth has been under increasing pressure over his handling of at least 7 formal complaints about a member. A 19-year-old volunteer has told media the Labour staff member sexually assaulted her. She raised it with Labour's ruling council during an internal investigation, but no disciplinary action was taken. Mr Howarth denies that he or Labour's investigators were informed about the serious allegation of sexual assault. One of the complainants has now provided a statement to RNZ, saying they are incredibly disappointed and saddened by Mr Howarth's response. The statement says they have had many email exchanges with Mr Howarth that talk about the nature of the investigation. It says Mr Howarth was a fatherly figure to the 6 women who've complained, but has let them down. Another complainant has told Checkpoint he also feels the party president let him down.
Nigel Howarth knew that there were elements of sexual assault and sexual abuse within the claims that were brought before the investigation committee. That was very clear right from the beginning. Everyone in the investigation panel knew that. We know through other survivors, and when they received their transcripts after the fact, that those elements had been omitted from their transcript.
The National Party leader says it's not a fair and accurate characterisation to say he met a member of the Chinese secret police while overseas last week. Simon Bridges had a meeting with Guo Shenqing on his 5-day visit to China. Anne-Marie Brady, a Canterbury University professor and expert on Chinese politics, has described Mr Shenqing as being part of the Chinese secret police. But Mr Bridges says he met with the country's justice and law and order spokesperson, and it's irresponsible to suggest otherwise. Mr Bridges says going to China doesn't mean he agrees with everything they do. He says he raised concerns about human rights abuses, but wouldn't detail who he raised them with. The British Prime Minister insists he will not request an extension to Brexit despite losing a second parliamentary vote for a snap general election. During a late and stormy debate, Boris Johnson told MPs he will return to Brussels to try and negotiate a deal. But he said he'll still plan for a no deal despite Parliament passing a law preventing him from taking Britain out of the EU without an agreement. The Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn says Mr Johnson still refuses to take no deal off the table.
There is no mandate for no deal. no majority support for it in the country and no majority support for it in this House. But he refuses to rule it out and refuses to set out any proposals to avoid it.
Jeremy Corbyn. Parliament is now suspended until October the 14th. A former constable says he considered suicide because of persistent bullying during his time with the police. An officer for nearly 3 decades in both England and New Zealand, he says he quit a few years ago due to mental stress. He is one of 40 current or former police staff who have told RNZ bullying is widespread in the police. Within weeks of starting his job here, the former constable says the bullying started as his sergeant sought to isolate him from the group. He later went to counselling to deal with his problems. The Police Commissioner Mike Bush says he doesn't think bullying is part of police culture. Asked what he would say to the people who have come forward to RNZ, he says they should trust the police with their complaints. All signs of the existing Lancaster Park in Christchurch will be erased by the end of the year. This morning, media were given a final chance to walk through the stadium before the last 2 stands are demolished. The park's grandstands were badly damaged in the 2011 earthquake, and in 2017, $12 million was set aside for it to be pulled down. Christchurch City Council's demolition manager, Lee Butcher, says the work will be completed by December. He says more than 35,000 tonnes of steel and concrete have been removed from the park and recycled. The council will consider a proposed spatial plan for the ground at a public meeting on Thursday. Floodwaters are receding in the Coromandel after severe rain hammered the region in 24 hours. More than 150 millimetres of rain fell, closing a number of parts of State Highway 25, running up the east coast of the peninsula and some smaller local roads. Only one portion of the State Highway now remains closed between Whitianga and Kuautunu, about halfway up the east coast. Thames Coromandel Civil Defence Controller Gary Towler says people who live in the area will just have to hunker down tonight, and all things considered, it wasn't too bad.
No major injuries. We have a couple of self-evacuations or assisted evacuations, but there's a lot of localised flooding. There may well be some, I would say, carport and garage flooding rather than actual residence flooding, but we won't know that until it starts to recede and we'll get full light tomorrow.
Gary Towler says emergency vehicles could get through the floodwaters if need be. It's 6:05. Super Rugby will start in January next year, marking the earliest kick-off in the 25 years of the competition. The competition will kick off when the Blues host the Chiefs on January 31st to allow for an uninterrupted competition window. Clay Wilson reports.
In previous non-World Cup years, the competition took a 3-week break to accommodate an international window in June before resuming in early July. The 2020 Super Rugby season, however, will run continuously without a break until the final on June 20th, before internationals begin in July. Next year's competition will also mark the final season for Japan's Sunwolves, after Sanza cut them in the wake of the Japan Rugby Union's decision to withdraw their financial support of the team. The defending champion Crusaders open their season against the Waratahs, the Hurricanes play the Stormers, while the Highlanders have a bye. This is Clay Wilson.
The Tall Blacks may have failed to advance from their pool at the Basketball World Cup in China, but there's still a chance of making their first Olympic appearance in 16 years. New Zealand's upset 102-101 win over Turkey in its final classification game has secured the Tall Blacks a place at an Olympic qualifying tournament, although coach Paul Hienare has mixed feelings.
Let's not dance around the fact that we didn't achieve our goals, but we still had plenty to play for. So to be able to do that against, what are they, top 10 team in the world, possibly the first time New Zealand has ever beaten Turkey that I can remember, definitely in my time.
Coach Paul Hienare. That's the news.
This is unacceptable. I did not sign up for this. When I prayed during the winter months, I asked the Lord to make it warm. I did not say, Lord, please bring the devil from hell and have him sit his ass crack on earth. That's not what I asked for.
Nights with Brian Crump. After the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel, rain or showers with possible thunderstorms and localised downpours. easing to isolated showers tomorrow morning. Waikato to Whanganui, also Bay of Plenty and Central High Country. Scattered showers clearing from the south tonight, fine tomorrow, possible showers in the west. Gisborne to Wairarapa, fine spells, isolated showers, some rain in Gisborne tonight. Manawatu to Wellington, also Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury. Mainly fine, isolated showers in Nelson tomorrow evening. For Bulla and Westland, fine but cloud increasing tonight with possible light showers. 1 or 2. Otago mainly fine, brief showers in the south early tomorrow. Fiordland and Southland fine at first, a few light showers about the coast, rain developing overnight, easing to isolated showers tomorrow morning, showers increasing in Fiordland tomorrow evening. And Chatham Islands light showers clearing tonight, periods of rain tomorrow evening, followed by more showers. RNZ National, it's 6:08.
Thank you, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. The political pressure over the Labour Party's sexual assault allegations shows no sign of abating, with the party president poised to resign if he's found to have mishandled the complaints. Adding to the chorus of criticisms is a man who says he was assaulted by the Labour staffer at the centre of the controversy. He's told RNZ it was clear the party didn't know what it was doing when it was investigating the complaints, and the process has been re-traumatising for the victims. Labour President Nigel Haworth is under intense scrutiny after the party's handling of the claims, with the Prime Minister refusing to express full confidence in him. A 19-year-old volunteer claims she was sexually assaulted by the Labour staffer last year, and she raised it with Labour's ruling council during an internal investigation, but no disciplinary action was taken. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
The man says he was assaulted by the Labour staffer when he challenged him about his abusive behaviour towards women in the party. His voice has been disguised to protect his identity.
He said in response, yes, I am trying to threaten you, at which point he stepped towards me with a clenched fist and made a swing at me. People held him back, so the punch did not land. However, it was a definite sort of getting in my space.
He says he fronted up to the panel established by Labour to hear the complaints.
It was horrific. The whole thing felt like it was orchestrated to protect him and his image, and the power imbalance was huge. It was clear that the party had no idea what they were doing.
As the stories continue to come out, there's intense pressure on the most senior Labour leadership. More than a month ago, a QC, Maria Dew, was brought in to review how the party had handled the investigation. Yesterday, the Prime Minister asked that QC to also review the actions of party officials. Jacinda Ardern says she's incredibly frustrated because she had been told by the party the complaints were not sexual in nature, in direct conflict with other accounts. She was asked how she could not have been aware there were allegations of sexual assault as detailed in news reports.
I continually through this process have queried with the Labour Party as whether or not they had received complaints that individuals had claimed to have been sexually assaulted, and I was told no.
She says Mr Haworth will respond accordingly after the QC's report is delivered.
He's claimed to me that he will do the right thing based on what the QC report tells us, and so my assumption is yes, that if he finds that there is wrongdoing on his part, that he will act on that.
Mr Haworth refused to answer any questions, including whether he had misled the Prime Minister, citing confidentiality. But he would say he didn't intend to resign for now.
I'm going to look at my situation as the process develops, right? We're going to do a review of this process, and if I've been found at fault, I will consider my position.
Mr Haworth issued a statement a few hours later and denied receiving any allegation of sexual assault from the 19-year-old volunteer, as was detailed on the Spin-Off website yesterday. But National's Deputy Leader Paula Bennett says she's personally seen evidence members of Labour's council did receive allegations of sexual assault.
I have absolutely no doubt at all that the panel knew. I think that there are so many people and so close to the Prime Minister that it's sort of inconceivable that she doesn't know kind of more or didn't ask more questions.
And she says some alleged victims have told her other people in Labour have known about the allegations for some time.
They're absolutely adamant that Grant Robertson knew Kiritapu Allen, Paul Eagle and other MPs. Certainly they're saying that the alleged perpetrator was involved in the campaign of Grant Robertson and Jacinda Ardern to go for leader in 2014, and that he's certainly close to Grant in that way.
Finance Minister Grant Robertson was not answering any questions about what he knew when, while the QC review is ongoing.
I think it's really important we let that occur. I found the allegations I read yesterday distressing, but we have a process now with the QC to work on that.
Jacinda Ardern has said the man concerned has not been working on site at Parliament for about 5 weeks. However, that was disputed by National's Paula Bennett, who says some of the complainants had seen him at Parliament, which they found very distressing. This morning, Ms Ardern said the record of the man's swipe card had been checked and he had not used his card to access any parliamentary buildings since early August. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
So, can Nigel Haworth cling on to his job? Former Cabinet Minister Peter Dunn believes it's time for him to go, and he joins me now on the phone. Hi, Peter.
Hello, Lisa.
Is it tenable for Nigel Haworth to stay on?
Look, there's either been the most massive cover-up here or the greatest singular act of serial incompetence, or a combination of both, under which circumstances it's impossible for him to carry on. He's either misled the party, the Prime Minister, or he's acted in a way that's just bungled this whole serious set of events.
The position at the moment is that the Prime Minister says she's waiting on the QC's report, and that Nigel Haworth has said if there's anything that suggests he has done wrong in this, he will go. So is it right to wait for that?
Well, I think that raises the other question of whether it's appropriate for the Labour Party to continue to be conducting an internal investigation into this when the process they followed to date has been so discredited. I think that the matter should be taken up by the police, it should be referred to them, and an independent investigation should take place. But I think Mr Haworth's actions throughout this whole drama really have been such to beg a belief that he really wasn't trying to cover up certain events or prevent certain events getting out to the wider party, and I think that is a disservice to those people who complain.
What's been said repeatedly is that none of the complainants have gone to the police. So are their hands tied, the Labour Party, in terms of that?
Well, I'm not sure about the strict legal position, but I think it would be appropriate in these circumstances where there are serious allegations that have certainly destroyed the credibility of the party president and are increasingly going to the credibility of the Prime Minister, for the police to be involved in some form of investigation. I mean, the Prime Minister's position is becoming rather interesting. Someone from her office has been suspended. 5 weeks later, she says she discovered only yesterday that that the reason for the suspension was due to allegations of sexual misconduct. Nigel Haworth apparently has known since the end of last year. The New Zealand Council of the Labour Party has known at least since July of this year. It's just unbelievable in those circumstances that someone hasn't said something to the Prime Minister.
How much is this hurting the Prime Minister?
I think it's hurting her increasingly because it goes to the heart of credibility, and credibility has been something, and integrity have been things she's staked her reputation upon. I suspect what's happened here, though, is that everyone's been so determined to protect the Prime Minister that they've either kept her out of the loop or told her only parts of the story or tried to invent cover stories to prevent her being seen to be involved. And as we know from various other efforts in New Zealand and elsewhere over the years, when you try and do that sort of thing, it always backfires, and it backfires on the person at the top.
So how do they fix this? Is it fixable?
Well, I think the only way forward now is for the Labour Party to stand aside from it all, hand the matter over to the police, ask them to undertake a full and proper investigation, get all the relevant information. There'll be documents and records and notes of interviews, etc., floating around. Get them on the table and let the police reach an independent assessment on the allegations that have been made, because they are very serious, and then take whatever action is appropriate in the light of that.
Good to talk to you. That's former Cabinet Minister Peter Dunn there. And on to a government announcement today. The government says suicide is a national tragedy and it wants to tackle it with a new prevention office. Last year, 685 people took their own lives, and the government says it's determined to reduce the toll. Here's our reporter John Gerritsen.
The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, says she was affected at a young age with a suicide close to home.
As a young person who had only just begun high school, I remember every single detail of the day that my best friend's brother took his own life. Every single detail. And now there are 685 of those stories around the country in 1 year alone. And that is 685 too many.
The suicide rate's been climbing since 2014. It's now almost 14 for every 100,000 people, which is almost 1 in 7,000 New Zealanders. That's almost twice the road toll. Today, the government unveiled a plan to offer free counselling for people bereaved by suicide and create guidelines to help health professionals identify and manage suicide risk. The Suicide Prevention Office will also support community organisations already working with people at risk. Sophia Graham from the Mental Health Foundation says just having a strategy will make a big difference, and the government's plan has some good features.
Some of the key points that we're really pleased to see include early support, so people don't have to get to a point of really bad distress or crisis before they can access mental health support. It is focused on supporting the supporters, so the people around you, your friends and your whānau, to make sure that they're able to look after you. It's investing in by Māori, for Māori and by Pacifica, for Pacifica approaches, which is really critical for success.
But Matthew Tukaki from the Māori Council is unhappy there's no specific plan for Māori.
I think it's missed the mark. I'm really extremely disappointed that there is no dedicated national strategy around Māori suicide prevention, and also extremely disappointed that it appears that the voice of Māori continues not to be listened to.
Matthew Tukaki says the government needs to accept that Māori groups can help. But mental health campaigner and comedian Mike King disagrees. He says Māori are not the only group affected by suicide, and targeting is not a good idea. He says the government has done more about the problem in 2 years than the previous government did in 9.
Everyone complains about the time that this has taken. It's taken 2 years of consultation. We have been briefed the whole way through. They've gone out into the communities and they've talked to actual people who are at the front line. The last government paid 9 years of lip service and did absolutely nothing.
Mike King says it's not just the government's task, and everyone has a part to play in reducing suicide.
There is a significant part of our population who have got this massive inner critic and they're telling themselves they're not worthy, and what's the point? So what's the answer to this connection? Let's get connected again. Let's lift everybody up. Let's help everybody to stop being horrible people and be kind to each other.
The government says it's a 5-year action plan, but reducing the suicide rate is a long-term challenge. From Parliament for Checkpoint, called John Gerritsen Tēnei.
And if you need assistance in any way around this topic, you can call Lifeline on 0800 543 354. That number again, 0800 543 354. Or you can free call or text 1737. That number again, 1737, anytime for support from a trained counsellor. Let us know your thoughts on the suicide prevention plan. Is the government doing enough? You can reach us on 2101, text us, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can send us an email at checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is 20 past 6, actually almost 21 past 6. Turning now to the issue of bullying in the police. And a former constable says he considered suicide because of the persistent bullying he faced during his time with the police. The man was a police officer for nearly 3 decades in England and New Zealand, but says he quit a few years ago due to mental stress. He is one of 40 current or former police staff who have now told Radio New Zealand that bullying is widespread in the police force. Our police reporter Ben Strang has more.
During his 20 years of work for the British Police, the former constable received several commendations and awards for his service before making the move to New Zealand for a better lifestyle. But within weeks, he says he noticed a completely different culture. He was left out of staff emails by his boss and then told off for not knowing crucial information. He was sworn at and abused, and eventually the pressure told. The man agreed to talk under the condition of anonymity and says that kind of culture needs to be exposed.
It destroys you, absolutely destroys you. And I remember going to the doctor and I just broke down, absolutely broke down. And I felt about an inch tall, I really did. But I had to go, otherwise I think I would have No, well, I would have topped myself. I really would.
On Monday, when RNZ broke the story of widespread bullying in the police, we had talked to 21 sworn police officers or non-sworn staff members who had personally experienced or witnessed bullying in their jobs. The youngest person we spoke to was about 40 years old. They were all from different parts of the organisation, based in different locations, and not close colleagues or even familiar with each other. In response to that story, more have come forward. There's 40 now that say they want to blow the lid on a widespread culture of bullying, and that number has been growing by the hour. The former constable says his direct boss sought to ostracise him.
Well, he was putting my life in danger, I thought. I really did. But it was just one small thing after another, after another, after another.
And he says those who push back against the bullying are only begging for worse.
Once you start standing up for yourself, then that's when they get the hatchet out and they really go for you. And they really went for me. And I just couldn't handle it anymore. I'd had enough.
Police Commissioner Mike Bush had declined to be interviewed about bullying in the police this week. However, when approached about it at the opening of the new Auckland Police headquarters near Ponsonby today, he said he doesn't think it's part of the police culture.
We do not tolerate bullying in our organisation. The culture inside the New Zealand Police has changed significantly over the last 10 years, and it's a very, very positive environment. But as the Commissioner, I'm determined to ensure that our workplace is a safe workplace for everyone. So we've set up good systems to ensure that if people feel they're being bullied, they've got somewhere to go and report it.
But staff have told RNZ they don't trust the Speak Up hotline, which was established to deal with anonymous complaints. They say the complaints are often directed straight to their bully, who is more often than not their direct supervisor. Mike Bush was asked what he would say to the 40 people who have come forward anonymously.
I say to them, anything that gives you concern, come to see us, we'll deal with it. Because it's not the way we lead inside the organisation. And everyone that works for us is safe.
The Police Minister, Stuart Nash, told RNZ in a statement the bullying issue is an operational matter for the Commissioner to handle. For Checkpoint, Ben Strang.
Aotearoa's biggest demolition job has entered its final stage. This morning, media were given a final chance to walk through Christchurch's Lancaster Park before it's completely brought to the ground. The park's grandstands were badly damaged in the 2011 earthquake and in 2017. $12 million was set aside for it to be pulled down. Nicholas Poynton was there.
The hammering sounds of demolition stands in stark contrast to the roaring crowds of Lancaster Park's glory days. The 130-year-old ground has been the stage for All Blacks matches, rock star performances and even world records. 57 years ago, Peter Snell set a world's best for the 800 metres in front of a capacity crowd on a grass track.
And Snell has a gap of about 20 to 30 yards on the second man Dupree, and Snell's legs are going like pistons. He goes out of the back straight round the top turn and heads out towards the home run. He's about 20, 30 yards ahead of Dupree, about 20 yards to Bork in third place, and that's how they'll finish.
Today was the last chance for media and the public to step inside Lancaster Park. Walking across the field where legends have once played, media crews had to be careful not to trip over steel piping that jutted out of the ground. Christchurch City Council Project Director Lee Butcher, who's overseeing the demolition, says he expects it to be completed by December.
We plan to have the building flat by end of the year, so sort of 10-12 months is what we thought the demolition phase would take, and it's taken around about that. We're a little bit behind where we want to be at the moment, but we're probably about 10-15 days behind where we want to be at the moment.
In the background, demolition crews chipped away at the remaining skeleton of the Dean stand, which was built in 2010. 3 diggers worked in harmony to take down a 6-storey concrete structure until finally it gracefully toppled over. Mr. Butcher says over 35,000 tonnes of concrete and steel has been removed from the site. He was pleased to say that 98% of the demolished material would be recycled.
Yeah, so the concrete itself, we've got a development in Rangiora that we're taking that to, so that's going to be used for ground improvement there, so that's a good win for us. We've got a use for it. The steel goes to salvages, it's for scrap steel. so that gets recycled too.
With the site at Lancaster Park expected to be completely stripped clear by January of next year, attention will turn to what's next for the ground. The council's head of parks, Andrew Rutledge, says the council wants to open the park up to the public as soon as possible.
We'll develop this place in phases, in stages. The first most important thing is to get people back in here, and that's most likely going to be in the form of local and community sport. And then we'll develop the rest of the park as budgets allow over the next decade.
Mr Rutledge says many people were sad to see the stadium go, but the new development will be sure to celebrate the legacy of the ground.
It's kind of hard to put it all into words, and through the new development we will reflect that. We will put a walkway, a trail in where we can reflect some of that history so people can reconnect with it.
The Christchurch City Council will convene to consider a proposed spatial plan for the site at a public meeting on Thursday. Residents will have 1 month to consult on how they want their beloved sports ground to look in the future. For Checkpoint, Nicholas Poynton.
Just before we go, some feedback here. Scott has sent us a very well thought out email about police bullying. He says, my father was a policeman from the 80s until perfing out in the early 90s. My mother often speaks about his experience as a young constable, learning how to navigate the workplace with the bullying culture of sergeants. The young guys did what the older guys said, or there was huge difficulty for them. This feeds the cultures of hard drinking, womanising and us and them, which has been well publicised about the force over the years. It led to his marriage breaking down and severe mental illnesses, the ripples of which are still felt by our family. People my own age who have been in the police have related similar stories to me. Things, it appears, have not changed. For these senior cops to suggest there is no culture of bullying is cynical, lying and protectionism at its worst. Some of you have got in contact about the debate between the mayoral hopefuls, John Tamahere and Phil Goff. This person says, why does Tamahere assume it's a woman with children needing transport to get the kids to schools or get the groceries? Sorry, that point alone, he's lost my vote right there. Paul's been in touch to say not a squeak from either candidate about car sharing. 90% of commuting cars only have one occupant. James says, heaven help us all if those two clowns are the best we can do. And Dave from Palmerston North's been in touch too. That debate sounded like the British Parliament, he said. We're back tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Some of those who've complained about a Labour Party staffer have accused the President, Nigel Howarth, of not telling the truth. Simon Bridges says it's not accurate or fair for a China expert to describe an official he met with there as a member of that country's secret police. A former constable who is among 40 police officers who've told RNZ about bullying in the force says it was so bad he considered suicide. And Christchurch City Council says the remains of quake-damaged Lancaster Park will be completely demolished by the end of this year. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather will be at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
Yet another big week in British politics. It's going to be controversial and probably tumultuous at times.
Lately with me, Karen Hayes, your late night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.
It's not a great option not to have an open money conversation because